Disabled people, what are some of the things that people do to try and help you but actually irritates the hell out of you? As an incomplete L2 paraplegic, I have some muscle movement in my legs but rely on a wheelchair for mobility. It can be frustrating when people offer help in situations where I don't need it, but I've learned to smile and politely decline. One thing that particularly bothers me is when people use a condescending tone, as if speaking to a child or a pet. I'm a grown man with a beard and I deserve to be spoken to with respect. Living independently, driving a car, and managing my daily activities are all part of my routine. Yet some people seem to think that life stops when you lose the ability to walk. This misconception is evident when they see me disassembling my wheelchair to fit into my car. They offer help, but they don't realize that I have a system that works for me. When people ask about my condition and I share my story, they often react with sadness. They apologize and look down, but I assure them that I'm happy with my life. Despite this, they still seem to feel sorry for me, and some even suggest that if I try hard enough, I might walk again. This is frustrating because they don't understand that it's not possible without some miraculous medical breakthrough. It's important to remember that disabled individuals don't venture out without a plan to handle any obstacles they might encounter. And it's crucial to never touch someone's wheelchair, cane, walker, service dog, or their body without permission. It's surprising how many times strangers have felt it's okay to push my chair or insist on helping me with my car, not realizing they're just getting in the way. The idea of someone pushing your chair without permission is baffling. It's similar to someone deciding you need a piggyback ride while you're walking. It's just not appropriate. While I appreciate the intent to help, it's essential for people to understand that when I don't ask for assistance, it's because I don't need it. And it's crucial to respect personal space and belongings. Life in a wheelchair is just a different way of navigating the world, and I'm content and motivated to live my life to the fullest. He's got a beard that could make lumberjacks weep with envy, but people still talk to him like he's a kindergartner who just drew a rainbow. Oh, you can drive? What a big boy you are. If only they knew he could also out-debate them on the finer points of beard oil. Story 2. I worked in a building with Dan, and Dan did something great for a customer, and I know this because the customer went out of their way to help him. Dan used a wheelchair similar to Stephen Hawking's, but he could still talk. We worked on the same floor and in the same office. When I was new, I saw Dan rolling towards the door, so I used my badge to open it for him. He hesitated, and I stood there holding the door. Dan eventually drove forward and ran over both of my feet. I learned that if I'd done nothing, the RFID tag in Dan's shoe would have automatically opened the door, just like in the elevator. When Dan uses the elevator, he turns his wheelchair around and his foot activates a sensor that takes him to the 10th floor where we work. If he activates the sensor on the 10th floor, it takes him to the lobby. The building was designed to accommodate Dan. I became friends with Dan. One day in the elevator, he mentioned a headache. I offered him some painkillers, but he declined, saying he wouldn't be able to control his legs. I stopped holding the door for Dan, which made things easier for everyone, letting the building take care of him. Once, as my coworkers and I were leaving for lunch, I was the last one out and Dan was there. I greeted him and let the door close behind me. My coworker Scott commented that I'd closed the door on Dan. I told him if he felt bad, he could hold the door for Dan, but I wouldn't do it again. Scott ended up getting his feet run over. One of my favorite things to do with Dan involved the elevator. If Dan turns around, it takes him to the 10th floor. If there are people in the elevator, he can't turn around, so he'll ask someone to press the button for the 10th floor. When the elevator stops, he backs out, and just as the doors are closing, I'd say, Dan, you know this is the 9th floor, right? Then I'd have to go to the 11th floor and walk down one flight of stairs, arriving just as Dan realizes he's on the correct floor. During a fire drill, I ran into the hall and stairwell, grabbed a stair descender gurney, and wheeled it up to Dan, telling him to get on because of the fire drill. Dan said he was exempt, but I insisted nobody was exempt in case of a real fire. Dan refused to get on, and I told him he could just stay if he wanted to, but not to come to me for help during a real fire because we didn't practice. Story 3. I have rheumatoid arthritis and occasionally use a cane. Despite appearing young and healthy, I sometimes experience significant back pain, which the cane helps alleviate. It can be awkward to discuss this with strangers, but I usually explain my condition if asked. Unfortunately, some people offer unsolicited advice, such as folk remedies, yoga, or chiropractic services, often in a condescending manner. This is frustrating for several reasons. I'm already proactive about managing my illness, staying informed about the latest research, and following my doctor's advice. It's not as if I've overlooked some simple solution. In these situations, I can't help but think sarcastically, of course, yoga. How did I not see it before? Thank you, kind stranger, for improving my life more than all of the specialists I've consulted. Who would have thought that a few stretches could outperform years of medical expertise and training? Story 4. I have Asperger's syndrome, and I was lucky to have a school psychologist who helped me overcome my communication challenges early on. This experience ignited a deep desire for personal growth that continued for over a decade. I transformed from a child who, at a young age, would cry out of frustration when people used idioms in front of me into someone who earned a college degree in psychology with a focus on perception and gender studies. These fields depend heavily on emotional and social cues, which were initially a significant deficit in my understanding of the world. However, I now grasp these concepts and communicate them effectively as evidenced by my degree. Despite this, when I tell people I have autism, they often don't believe me. They say things like, "You must have been misdiagnosed. People with real autism can't do what you do." Yet these same skeptics then go out of their way to help me understand things, treating me as if I'm less capable. They speak to me in simplified terms or repeatedly check my understanding, which wasn't necessary before they knew about my autism. This behavior undermines and belittles my personal development and my ability to interact with peers. I often have to conceal my diagnosis to prevent coworkers from adopting this demeaning attitude around me as it keeps happening. This creates a self fulfilling prophecy where people mistakenly view me as socially limited due to my autism. In reality, I simply don't want to be around someone who talks to me as if I'm a child and English isn't my first language. What starts as a kind gesture or misplaced empathy turns into inappropriate coddling, which disrespects the years of therapy and education I've invested in my own personal growth. And then imagine if every time someone found out you're autistic, they had to pay you $1 for every patronizing comment. You'd be rolling in cash faster than you can say, "Actually, I don't need you to repeat that in slow motion." It's a win win. Either you get rich or people learn to have a conversation without treating you like you've just landed from another planet. Story 5. I worked on a college project with a girl who had bone problems, which meant her body, aside from her head, didn't grow much and she used a wheelchair. Despite this, she could use her hands and arms for tasks that didn't involve lifting heavy weights, so we could work together easily. The only thing we needed to plan for was her mobility. She always insisted on carrying her own things and was open about her condition. It was clear she wanted to show that her disability didn't hold her back and that she was independent. I adapted by only offering to help when she truly couldn't manage or had too much to carry. The same help I'd offer anyone without disabilities. Over time, I began to forget she was disabled. I mean this in the most respectful way. Her wheelchair became an integral part of who she was, and sometimes I wouldn't even remember it. Once, we were heading to the cafeteria and the elevator was out of service. Without thinking, I suggest we take the stairs, quickly realizing my mistake. I was embarrassed, but she smiled broadly and said, "You forgot I'm in a wheelchair. That's awesome." Story 6. I have spina bifida, which impacts my legs, brain, bowel, and bladder. I get around using either a wheelchair or leg braces. One thing that really bothers me is when people make assumptions about me without knowing me. A few years ago, my family and I went to a restaurant. We sat down and the server gave menus to everyone except me. As she walked away, my mom asked why I didn't get a menu. The waitress responded, "Oh, I didn't realize he was eating with you. I thought he ate differently." There was no indication that I had a feeding tube, and I don't, but she assumed I did and didn't give me a menu. Another time, I was shopping for a tuxedo. It was clear I was capable, but the saleswoman talked down to me in the worst way. I was a high school sophomore at the time, and I didn't appreciate it. When it was time to try on the tuxedo, the woman kept asking if I needed help from outside my dressing room, even though my mom was there, making it obvious I didn't need assistance. The woman assumed I couldn't dress myself, and it got so bad that my mom and another gentleman waiting for his son spoke up to correct her. The simple lesson is not to assume what a disabled person can or cannot do. We can surprise you with our abilities, and we know how to ask for help when we truly need it. We won't just sit there helplessly. That's all I have to say. And if you're enjoying the video, please allow me to say that I would super appreciate you hitting that like and subscribe button for more videos just like this, and it really does help out the channel, so thanks in advance. Story 7. I have a rare condition called KTS, which I was born with and has worsened over the years. As a child, I became dependent on a wheelchair due to medical symptoms, and that's when I started noticing how differently I was treated, especially by teachers and other adults. They would speak to me in a softer, slower voice, almost like baby talk. This still infuriates me. Using a wheelchair doesn't mean I'm mentally handicapped, and that kind of speech isn't appropriate. Please, just talk to me like you would anyone else. I've been hospitalized multiple times due to a weakened immune system. For me, this is normal and has become part of my life. No matter how much it made me struggle, I understand the desire to show compassion, but please do it in a way that doesn't encourage self pity. I'd much rather hear something like, "This is not fun, let's grab a drink when you're out." My last big irritation often happens in bars, but also at the university and other places. People come up to me and say things like, "It's nice to see someone like you out," or "It's great that you're here. I know you mean well, but I'm no better than anyone else around me. Everyone has worked hard to get where they are, and they all have their own struggles, even if they're not as visible as my physical condition." Story 8. As a legally blind person with nearsightedness, I need to remove my glasses to bring normal sized text close enough to read. When I wear contacts, I often only use one to maintain some distance vision while still being able to read up close. I used to get upset when people asked if I had considered seeing an eye doctor. I hid my frustration, but I always wanted to sarcastically reply, "No, I hadn't thought of that in 25 years. Thank goodness you suggested it." As I matured, I understood the natural human instinct to offer solutions to problems, often without thinking. I've seen myself on security cameras, and when I read something, it looks like I'm trying to smell it. People might assume I'm struggling and offer help, but I can read just fine with the text close to my face, despite how it may appear to others. My advice is simple. If someone doesn't seem to need assistance, don't offer it. If you're eager to help, introduce yourself and make a new friend. Don't make their vision an issue. If you're heading the same way, walk with them. The opportunity to help will arise naturally, but let them ask for it or only offer help if they appear to be struggling. Story 9. My sister is legally blind, but she's developed her radar so well that most people she interacts with don't notice. However, it can be interesting when they find out. We were at a T-Mobile recently. She walked in beside me with no issues, looked around for an iPhone, found the one she wanted, and we approached the counter without any problems. The employee hadn't realized she was blind until he asked her to sign some documents. She leaned down to look at the paper closely, and he suddenly exclaimed, "Oh, you can't see, I'm sorry," and quickly took the paper away. He then became visibly panicked and ran to get the manager to figure out how a blind person could sign the documents. What should have taken her just a few seconds to handle turned into a big production because he was trying to help her. I won't speak for my sister, but in my experience, people with challenges will ask for help when they need it. If they don't, it's not impolite to offer assistance by asking, "Do you need a hand?" Just respect their boundaries and autonomy. We all need help sometimes, but don't assume you need to save someone just because something is harder for them than it is for you. Story 10. I faced numerous challenges even before my physical disability was diagnosed. I grew up with a chemical imbalance that causes uncontrollable and spontaneous bouts of challenges. Childhood was tough because almost any stimulation, fear, anger, sadness, stress, adrenaline, excitement, would trigger these episodes. My parents raised me in a quiet and stable environment and didn't enroll me in activities due to my condition. Just getting through a school day was incredibly challenging, especially since I was often pestered. When I was a teenager, I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy, which devastated my parents, but they insisted on treating me normally within my limitations. Interacting with the world or other adults is difficult because I appear relatively normal, leading people to say insensitive things or treat me poorly when they discover my issues. Sometimes they offer countless remedies or treatments, or compare me to others with disabilities and criticize me for not achieving the same level of success. The worst experiences, however, come when I have to use public transit. Living in a large city, buses are often crowded and standing is excruciating for me due to my condition. The exhaustion and pain can make me very emotional. If I manage to get a seat, I'm sometimes pestered to give it up for older passengers. When I explained that I need the seat due to my disability, I met with skepticism and comments like, "You don't look disabled." I find it less stressful to stay at home rather than endure bus rides. Someone once told me that I was choosing to suffer from muscular dystrophy, that it was all in my head and I could cure myself if I really wanted to. Story 11. I have cerebral palsy on the right side of my body. It's incredibly frustrating when I'm playing sports and I can tell others are going easy on me, or when I'm trying to do something on my own and someone insists on helping, disrupting my efforts. If it takes me more than 5 seconds to pick up a glass, please leave me alone. I can do it, even if it takes me an extra 30 seconds. If I need help, I'll ask for it. It can be hard to tell if a disabled person wants help or not, but please understand that sometimes offering help can make us feel more disabled. It's never wrong to offer assistance, but consider whether we've been only trying for a few seconds and it looks like we're struggling, or if it's an obvious struggle that requires intervention. Most of us have grown up with our disabilities and have undergone physical therapy and training to live our lives. We don't need assistance every second of the day. Just because we might take longer to do something doesn't mean we're struggling. I'm fortunate that my disability is relatively minor, noticeable only when you look at my right side. I can't imagine how those with more severe disabilities feel. Remember, most of us just want to feel like everyone else. Story 12. I have bipolar type 1, which is the rarest and most severe form, characterized by rapid mood changes, which is even more uncommon. I also have PTSD, general and social anxiety, and EDNOS. What irritates me, aside from people saying it's not real or just get over it, is when they try to tell me they know how to fix me. I see 3 different specialized doctors and take a lot of medication, including class 3 controlled medications, and even that doesn't make me feel normal. Yet some people think being more social and getting exercise will solve everything. I know that if I could find the energy and courage to get out of bed and go for a run, I'd feel better, but it's not that simple. I also get frustrated when people blame me for not being as far along in life as others. Just leaving the house every day is a massive challenge, and the fact that I can sit through a whole class without having a panic attack or hallucinating is a miracle. If you know someone with any mental illness, especially a severe one, don't try to fix them. They know what's wrong and what needs to be done. Just be kind, show some love, don't assume you understand their struggles, and be there when they come to you for help, not the other way around. Story 13. I was born with a disability due to brain damage from an accident or possible negligence at birth, which is classified as cerebral palsy. My condition is more severe than that of RJ Meat from Breaking Bad. While I don't have a speech impediment like him, I can't walk, and many of my muscles didn't develop properly as I grew older. As a kid, my mother was told my condition was so severe that I might not live past the age of 5. When I was a teenager, I had undergone 14 major surgeries, but I will never walk. Now, I'm an adult. I'm only seen as disabled by those who don't know me well, and I strive to lead a normal life. Those who thought I wouldn't amount to much were wrong. I'm a driven person, trait shared by many disabled individuals who want to live their lives fully. Despite my severe early challenges, most people today don't realize I'm disabled unless they see my wheelchair, leading to some amusing and awkward situations, usually with strangers. It's crucial to ask if help is needed. Many people try to help without asking, which can be very offensive. Pay attention to the answer, as only the disabled person knows their capabilities. If they decline help, wish them a good day and move on. Chances are they're fine and have done whatever they're attempting many times before. Remember, every disabled person's needs are unique. When you ask if help is needed, be unafraid to ask and accept the answer. The person will know if they truly need help, and if they're wise, will accept it. One thing that upsets me is when people hit on a disabled person and ask, "Does it work down there?" It's an audacious question, and there's no way to answer yes without it being as awkward as the question itself. Story 14. My daughter has good vision now, but she was blind for most of her first year. The first thing I told people was not to touch her hands. For someone who can't see, their hands are like their eyes. People would try to put things in her hands, but it wasn't helpful. It's better to place items near her and she'll pick them up herself. Trying to guide her hands or put something in them directly would frustrate her. It's akin to poking someone in the eyes. This might differ for adults with blindness, but for my daughter as a child, the hand thing was irritating. Secondly, why do people talk to blind people as if they're deaf? I had many people shout at my daughter once they knew her vision was poor. It was strange. Her hearing was exceptionally good because she couldn't see well, so anything louder than a normal volume was painfully loud for her. My daughter also has cerebral palsy, which is mild, but she can't walk despite being a toddler. Many people insist that I shouldn't spoil her and should let her walk when we're in stores. It's frustrating. Because she looks typical, people don't realize there's a valid reason she can't walk like other children. They think we're just spoiling her by carrying her everywhere. Alright, if any of these stories got to you and you want to hear more of them, here's more because YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and big thanks for hanging out with me on this one.